Is TWW too hard, Matt?
Yes, yeah.
Is it?
It is, yeah.
Oh, see, that balloon appears to be floating towards a big spike.
Balloon. Balloon.
That's a balloon. So,
World
Preheat.
of Warcraft's Hindenburg.
I'm not going to read anyone's posts. Preheat hates the game. J.B. hates the game.
Well, everyone knows that.
And there you go. I'm sure Max and Scribe hate the game as well.
Which is actually really funny because JLP is very, very, very supportive of healing being extremely difficult. Because he plays a healer and likes having fun.
Well, Preheat has said that he is folding himself in half and bending over backwards. I wonder why. Apparently he says to try and convince myself that Mythic Plus and the War Within is fun. Between the bugs, trash mechanics. But what does he mean? Is it the mechanics of the trash mobs, or are the mechanics trash?
It's the mechanics of the trash mobs. It's the mechanics of the trash mobs. So, because every other bit of trash is something that'll wipe your group. You don't do it.
So, Matt, could you explain?
Could you expand on this a little bit? So, I haven't had the most experience at M Plus because doing it in beta is a terrible experience because everyone on beta is just. I don't know, they're weird. So most I'll say.
Players like Preheat and J.B.
Yeah. And I also have EU to US ping because they don't have an EU beta, which is perfectly fine, I suppose. It just really doesn't feel good. But realistically, I think, oh no, I can't pull the whole dungeon with my Demon Hunter anymore and I actually need to take it slower. Cry. I get where you're coming from. I get what you're saying. And this is where we have a very fun problem. And I think I've explained this before in World of Warcraft and on the stream about like difficulty and stuff. Some players want this game to be brutal. Some players want this game to be easy. Where those players have an intersection, there are problems. Blizzard cannot design for both of them. Especially when more difficult things end up being, more fun. It's more like, oh, well, you'll have more fun if you do the harder thing. And that's true. But true for some. But what actually happens is this is kind of nuts. They've really tuned up.
That's the title. The War Within is nuts.
Yeah, they've tuned, or like they've turned up rather.
Yeah.
The amount of stuff that's happening kind of all the time, really. So I've noticed that like healing specifically feels like you've got twice as much to do as DPS, and one of the things I noticed with healing is. I haven't healed much M Plus in live in a while, so I don't know that. So there is like, it feels like you have to learn the dungeons quite heavily, more so than before.
Good heavens!
If you don't know damage profiles, you're going to have panic moments that you can't do anything about. That's the insane thing. Like DPS have so much to dodge, so much to interrupt. It's really heavy on the cognitive load side of things. Of constantly paying attention, that with a little bit more difficult or more like as Dragonflight talent trees have kind of evolved, we have gotten back to slightly more complicated DPS rotations than usual, and a lot more tools, a lot more utility keys.
Does that mean we're getting closer to Mists of Pandaria?
Not in the same feeling.
Certainly not in the dungeons.
Yeah, not they don't feel not in the way it feels the same. I could sort of argue possibly in complexity. So there's a little bit more complexity in every angle. And it's like your class is a little bit harder to play now. Your hero talents are mostly fairly passive, but they do have interactions in a lot of cases. And you go, okay, well, there you go. That's cool, interesting. That's fun. But then that goes in. And also you have to you interrupt way more than before, generally speaking.
Well, that's okay. Players found it easy.
You also,
in the past.
you can't rely on stops. You can't just blinding light because then all the mobs will just cast right away again. And that's even worse in some cases because what happens is you will, say there's two mobs casting. One's half a second away, one's a second and a half away. Okay, well there's a second gap between the cast command. That gives some vague degree of staggering incoming damage. If you stop them, they'll both start casting at the same time again. Which means you've just turned Shadow Bolt for half your health, bit of time to heal, Shadow Bolt for half your health, into Shadow Bolts for all your health, which is a really, that's it's going to be rare that happens that way, but it's like the kind of feeling what happens where you're like, I'm going to use my button that buys us a second. Oh, it's just made life worse. Oh shit.
See, I think about
That kinda happens.
season 3, where they really took some of the difficulty down, and we saw in time rates. Be pretty much always, other than like Fall of Murazond, they were above 80%, right?
Yeah.
Some closing in 90. My memory's fuzzy in the numbers, but it definitely seemed like the win rate went up, the number of runs went up. So that worked, but here, will this feel like a real? Will this be Whiplash?
I feel like this is going to be some Whiplash. It depends on how it goes live, because they could easily go, and here's a 20% or a buff on everyone, walk over mobs, kill them faster, because obviously kill rates and heal strength like makes it really important, right? That's really important. But at the minute, it seems like it's really overwhelming. Not like in a this is impossible way, but in a you're not going to have an easy time. There's a lot of movement as well. Like I think the example I will now, obviously Grim Batol, right? Grim Batol had nothing to do in the original version. That's something, but not a huge amount. Now it's fucking crazy. Like there's the like Draconid boss that basically did nothing of any note. Now has so much going on that you're kind of panicking. Having to heal and move loads means that if you're like a bad healer, you will struggle like hell. It's going to be more a test for healers than anything else, I think. And we'll see how that pans out. But I'll just say, as a healer, I can't wait to be blamed for everything in Mythic Plus. Yeah, there's going to be a teething period at the beginning of this expansion, unless they nerf like crazy, where there's going to be like, healer didn't heal me? Oh no. You're shit. To hell with you. I think there's going to be a lot of that going on. And that's the same case of if a DPS doesn't interrupt, well, that's a healer problem, isn't it? Because the game doesn't say, the DPS doesn't, know that they died from not interrupting. They're just like, my health bar went to 0. My responsibility was to keep, your responsibility.
I fixed it.
Keep my health bar up. Yeah.
I fixed it. And we can leverage all the H100s that Microsoft have acquired to solve this problem.
Yep.
Easy. And Satya will love it because it's AI.
Yeah.
You know the death recap?
Yes.
Now, we need World of Warcraft Copilot, available in Windows machines only.
Oh, dear God.
So, whenever you die, GPT-4o tells you whose fault it is.
Always says tank. Sorted.
There we go.
Sorted. Yeah, it's interesting. Used like the problem of like healers having either too much to do or too little to do is probably going to be similar enough at the minute. Just because if you don't use your defensive right, and you don't use your CC right, and if tanks pull aggressively without having a solution, it's going to kind of be game over for a lot of people. Now, there's an element of maybe we'll outscale this because the like item level testing things is kind of obviously they keep us reasonably low on beta, so we don't just walk over stuff. But it is it concerns me personally, not in a massive way. I don't expect this to be the game's dead forever, but I am really expecting a fairly rocky launch on this front.
Okay. Yeah.
Maybe that's one of the reasons for the extra time before the season starts to get things in a better spot on their front. Maybe
1 week can be pretty radical in terms of change, especially if it's 1 week of, oh dear, we are going to be absolutely flattened. That could certainly motivate. That could motivate them. However, it's bound to be in their mind that they can't unnerf things, because that'll feel really bad to players. So with difficulty, you end up in a weird thing of undershooting and overshooting. Sometimes it may be a little bit better to overshoot with how hard something is, because you can always pare it back down. Whereas if you undershoot, then people just have the big happy zoom loop bonanza, and then it feels terrible whenever you make the difficulty closer to intended.
Yeah.
So certainly dilemmas. I think what's been interesting is this has been very clear feedback that we have seen from the higher end Mythic Plus people. I guess a question is, and I say question fully because I've not been watching streams and stuff. I wonder what Keystone difficulty they are doing things at, because
this is the crazy part, and this is what is
oh no
this
oh
is what's
no
making things
it's
very
over.
difficult.
It's over.
It's very difficult to get people to do anything less than a 10 on beta.
Less than a 10.
Yeah.
Right, so gear stops at plus 10.
Yeah.
So when you and your guild are doing some plus 8s on week 3, will it actually be nowhere near as bad? Because plus 10 is where... Yeah. Plus 10 is where both Tyrannical and Fortified are up. So that's quite a jump in difficulty. And then plus 12 is when the Xalatath 20% buff happens, which will just mean, like, scaling just to the tits.
Yeah.
It's like the difference between a plus 12 and a plus 14 is going to be big, because, that's sort of the additional 20% is there on top of the normal Keystone difficulty inflation.
Yeah.
So we're having all this feedback, and maybe this is what the big pushers are talking about. I wonder what it will be for
I'm going to
average
say
player.
a lot of this is also mechanically. Like, the actual level of being punished for failing mechanics is really high.
Okay.
And that's just in raw damage. All that stuff is kind of, it's like baked into the actual difficulty. It's not all skilling. This isn't, obviously there's a point where you go, well, you can outgear and kill mobs faster than they become a problem.
Yeah, so this isn't
this is a case of, like, you walk into a room in Stone Vault and you pull 2 or 3 of the shamans and they put earth burst totems down, and one of those earth burst totems go off, you fucking die. Or you lose half your HP and the totem doesn't disappear, it goes again. Or 2 of them will wipe your group, and you have to be careful for that. Or even boss, like the Stone Vault boss with the 2 of the, can't remember their names, the 2 fellas you have to kill at the same time. You remember in, what was it? Is it Grimreal Depot? There's the 2 bosses, and one's the wee missile fucker who jumps around.
The first boss, yeah.
Yeah, and then the other one's the big one, you knock him into the wall. It's a vaguely similar concept, where there's one big scrapper and he's throwing scrap around the place, and one's throwing missiles and setting lava up. And in WoD, if you kill one and there's the other one's left alive, they start to ramp up damage. In Stone Vault, if you kill one, the other doesn't start to ramp up damage. They just start to go, I'm enraged now. Bam, 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 bam. Insane amounts of damage output. So the window you have to kill both at the same time is way smaller design-wise than it was in WoD. And that's kind of the case all over the place. There's a lot of layers of, there's a lot of layers of skill ceiling in this.
Right.
But in ways it'll punish you as well, and that's baked into the mythic mechanics. So you're going to feel that at Mythic 0. You can outgear to some degree, but it's still like, it feels like they've upped the skill ceiling this substantially.
I would say.
And I think that might be a better thing, but, in the idea that this is you progress Mythic Plus throughout the season by getting better with your gear. There's going to be people who are really good at the game, who are going to hop in and do plus 10s the first couple weeks and be like, easy, fine, this is grand, we'll push keys now. There's other people who are going to look at us, who are going to try to do a 7 or 8 and be fucking obliterated, and they're not going to want to build back up, I imagine.
This cuts through to something that's been floating around my head the last while, and that is how much design there is a design question.
Yeah.
And in a lot of modern breakout hit games, you see less but better. Now, that's not me saying that this is bad, but it is to say, if you have a bunch of designers and they're making a bunch of mobs and they're putting mechanics in all of those mobs, the design of those mechanics is a design decision. But how intricately designed every part of that dungeon, all of those mobs, that's also a design decision. And I think there's a lot of times where you can make a game that is harder and in some ways designed better, thinking about, a dungeon where you know, you see this thing of beauty, a group of players go in, the hunter's firing off a trap, an enemy CC'd, everyone's just mind melded together, and it's amazing. Because there's so many challenges, but they've perfectly used all of their tools. And you could look at that and think, man, that's some beautiful gameplay. Isn't it amazing that this game has allowed for that to happen? And then you cut to a normal dungeon run. Tank goes in, pulls everything, everyone screams, dies, and it's terrible. And they all quit the dungeon and the key depletes. So, how much design? How much design is the question. I mean, if you're going to say that Fortified is a thing, and actually it's not trash, that's part of the dungeon, then they should have abilities and should matter in the same way that I can't believe it. In the same way that back in the day, in the Cataclysm Heroics,
Heroics again.
Back in my day, I mean, there'd been mobs where, I mean, it was a great thing as a hunter where you could
Freezing trap?
trap and wyvern sting?
Wyvern sting, yeah.
Yeah, you could double CC mobs. It was awesome. But you'd have to do that whenever people were under geared, or you would just be melted.
Yeah.
Of course, wasn't a time trial.
Yeah, that's the big difference.
Now, in my head, that was like pretty great, beautiful design. Because I felt like, oh, wow, I really am a hunter. Look at me using all of my hunting abilities. Awesome. Whereas in a Mythic Plus, it's now no longer about, can I do my hunter thing good? It's about, can I do that really, really, really fast? While also dealing with Xal'atath dropping 10 orbs and, 10 orbs on top of me because of an affix that I then have to deal with. While those orbs also make it far harder for me to tab target the things that I want to CC or interrupt.
Yeah.
Because of playability. And that's another thing of how much design is good, because all of those mechanics can be good, can be interesting, but it's it's just the cognitive load.
Yeah. Well, this is something that this is another, I guess we're just talking about M+ design now. It's great. Tay just said, you cannot be strategic in a dungeon and have a time limit. Well, that sparked a very interesting thought, because you can't be strategic in a dungeon, but you can be strategic in that dungeon in another run. And isn't that the point of an arcade-like repeatable mode where, oh, you failed, try again? Now, the game doesn't support that. The game doesn't support that because the game is do pugs, because you don't have 4 people who have like 2 hours spare. You get the perfect group comp, all that stuff, right? That's one of the things. And also the deplete. The depleting is still in the game. I don't understand. I don't understand why you drop a key level. I don't get it. But there is definitely a case of you fuck up the dungeon. Sweet. Let's go again. And the difference being is you do the dungeon again as a whole piece versus you do the pull again as a whole piece. Because if you do the pull again as a whole piece, what happens? Resources. Okay, we'll wait for cooldowns pack. Oh, we'll wait for hero. The dreaded. What if we just wait out Lust and it takes us 2 hours to the dungeon, but we do it. And that's the kind of the thing that keeps happening, where there's a little bit of, you can see the game they're trying to make. Is it the best fit for the audience? Is it the best experience overall? And that's like the big question. Now, I personally think that in an ideal world where I didn't have to rely on 4 other players that I don't know and will probably never see again because I don't do above +10s, because I don't have enough time to. Not that I don't have time. I don't particularly enjoy that kind of style of gameplay. I like it. I would very much enjoy I enjoy the getting better incrementally. I enjoy I've done the Stone Vault 10 times now, and now I don't have to think about the boss anymore. Yeah. I just do it. It just happens, which means I get to add a little bit of flourish. I get to add a little bit more damage, a little bit more whatever. I get to heal better, all that stuff. Yeah, I love that. But,
I mean, see, I imagine
that doesn't work with pugs. That doesn't work with pugs because you want to get the fucking pug to get in, get it done, get your gear and get the fuck out, get your Great Vault thing. Because what really happens is you go, I can't wait for this idealized Mythic Plus experience where I get to go in and show a little bit of flourish and see how this goes. And
Every time you say show a bit of flourish, I imagine, you
a little fucking
you
pirouette,
see,
like.
no, you CC an ability and then you do a 360 in your gaming chair.
That's about right. So I'm like, oh, this is great. I love that. I love this in theory.
Yeah.
And then it turns around, you go, and actually, what just happened was that healer was slightly off in their timing, or was new to this dungeon, and fucked up that pull, which meant the mage or warlock went, fuck this, I'm out. I don't have time to waste on you plebeian player. And then you have to start again, and that's like 10, 15 minutes of your day gone, and you don't get any loot, and you're like, I fucking hate this piece of shit game. You all day forward, don't play for a week. Definitely hasn't happened to me before. I had people on beta leave after like a pull gone bad. And I'm like, bro, it's beta.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
And in order to hit their testing goals, they need to be playing with good players.
Yeah, it's mad. Like, it's mad. So, like, I get the timer idea, and I think it would probably be very different if the timer wasn't there. But it's kind of crazy. I love the game that they're theoretically making. It's just when rubber touches the road, it tends to go fucking veering off into the ditch. And I think that's the big problem with some of the difficulty in this. So I'll be keen to see how I'll be very keen to see how it pans out. I'm super hopeful that their idea of more difficulty just works. But I definitely expect teething issues.